Those 7 words, whispered by a stranger on an autumn afternoon, would shatter a single father's ordinary day and ignite a story no one saw coming. Least of all, the broken young woman who was simply trying to remember what human touch felt like. Stephen Scott was nursing his black coffee on his favorite bench outside the Corner Bean Cafe in Portland, Oregon, watching autumn leaves spiral down onto the cobblestone sidewalk. It was one of those rare October afternoons where the sun broke through Portland's usual gray, painting everything gold. His daughter Zephra was inside having her weekly auntie day with his sister, which meant he had exactly 30 minutes of blessed solitude. He was lost in thought when he sensed someone standing beside him. Close. Too close for a stranger. Stephen turned. A young woman stood there, impossibly thin and fragile, like she might blow away with the next gust of wind. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, but it was her eyes that stopped him. Hazel eyes, impossibly sad, fixed on him with a desperation that made his chest tighten. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, shaking slightly. Stephen blinked. In his 34 years on Earth, he'd been asked for a lot of things. Money, directions, the time. But this was entirely new territory. The woman must have seen the confusion flash across his face because tears immediately welled up in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I know that's weird. I shouldn't have—" She started to turn away, her shoulders hunching inward like she was trying to disappear into herself. "Wait," Stephen said, standing up quickly. There was something about her, about the raw vulnerability in her expression that reminded him of the children he worked with at the pediatric therapy center. That look of someone who'd been hurt so badly they'd forgotten what kindness felt like. "It's okay." The simple question broke something in her. Her face crumpled, and she shook her head. "No, I'm really not. I haven't had a hug in so long, and I saw you sitting here and you look kind, and I just thought maybe—" She trailed off, mortified by her own request. Her hands were trembling. Stephen's heart cracked open. He didn't think. He just opened his arms. "Come here," he said softly. The woman hesitated for only a second before stepping into his embrace. The moment his arms closed around her, she collapsed against his chest, her thin frame shaking with quiet sobs. He could feel how bony her shoulders were, how she trembled like a leaf barely clinging to its branch in a windstorm. She held on to him like he was a life raft in the middle of a vast dark ocean. Stephen held her gently, carefully, the way he'd held his daughter after her worst nightmares. He didn't say anything. Sometimes words were useless. Sometimes all another human being needed was to be held, to be reminded that they existed, that they mattered. After what felt like both a moment and an eternity, the woman pulled back, wiping frantically at her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice thick with embarrassment. "That was completely inappropriate. I promise I'm not crazy." She looked down at her feet. "I'm Eclipse Porter." Despite the heaviness of the moment, Stephen smiled. "Stephen Scott. And for what it's worth, you don't seem crazy." He gestured to the bench. "Would you like to sit down? Maybe tell me what's going on." Eclipse looked at him, really looked at him, like she was trying to figure out if he was real. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to, but I'd like to." They sat together on the bench, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Eclipse seemed to be gathering herself, deciding whether to trust this stranger who'd just held her while she cried. Finally, she took a shaky breath. "Today marks exactly 2 years since my entire life fell apart," she said, staring at her hands. 2 years ago today, I was driving home from my nursing shift at a hospital in Seattle." She paused, her jaw tightening. "I was stopped at a red light, just sitting there waiting. And then this drunk driver came out of nowhere and slammed into my car at full speed." Stephen winced. "Eclipse?" "The impact crushed the driver's side of my car like it was made of aluminum foil. I remember the sound, this awful screaming of metal and glass shattering, and then pain. So much pain I couldn't even scream. I remember thinking, this is it." She looked up at the sky, blinking back fresh tears. "But I didn't die. They had to cut me out of the car. I'd sustained severe spinal injuries and a shattered pelvis. She took a breath. I spent 8 months in hospitals and rehabilitation centers, 3 surgeries on my spine, 2 on my pelvis. Learning to walk again was... She laughed bitterly. They don't tell you in the movies how humiliating it is, how much it destroys your sense of self when you can't do basic things anymore. I'm a pediatric physical therapist, Stephen said quietly. I've worked with kids going through similar trauma. She shook her head. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like survival. And barely that. The medical bills buried me. I had insurance, but not enough. Every surgery, every night in the hospital, every therapy session, it all added up. I'm drowning in debt. Stephen let out a low whistle. But here's the thing. I could have handled the physical pain. I could have handled the debt. She finally looked at him, and the anguish in her eyes nearly undid him. My parents disowned me 6 years ago. I'd married someone they didn't approve of, Marcus. He was from a different background, different religion, different socio-economic class. They said if I married him, I was choosing to cut them out of my life. I thought they were bluffing. When the accident happened, I tried to reach out. Her voice cracked. I called from the hospital. My dad answered. I told him what happened. And you know what he said? He said, "You made your choices." Stephen felt anger rise in his chest. It gets better, Eclipse said with a hollow laugh. Marcus, my husband, left me 3 months after the accident. He filed for divorce while I was still using a walker. She took another shaky breath. I lost my job because I couldn't go back to nursing. The physical demands were too much. My disability payments barely cover rent for a studio apartment in one of Portland's rougher neighborhoods. I moved here hoping for a fresh start, but instead I found nothing. Stephen asked gently. Drifted away. At first they visited, brought flowers, said the right things. But chronic pain and disability make people uncomfortable. They don't know what to say. The invitations stopped coming. The calls became less frequent. Eventually they disappeared entirely. And I don't blame them. I became a black hole of need and sadness. She turned to face him fully. Do you know what the worst part is? Not the pain, though that's there every single day. Not the debt or the loss of my career or even my family's rejection. The worst part is that I realized this morning, 2 years to the day of the accident, that I haven't had any physical affection. Not a hug, not even a handshake that meant something. Tears were flowing freely now. I felt like I was disappearing, like I wasn't even human anymore. Just this ghost moving through the world, taking up space but not really existing. I left my apartment today thinking I might just walk until I couldn't walk anymore. But then I saw you sitting here, and something about you looked safe, kind, like maybe you'd understand. And I just... She covered her face with her hands. I'm sorry. This is too much. Stephen sat with her words, feeling their weight. Finally, he spoke. 3 years ago, my wife collapsed while jogging. She went out for a morning run, same as she did every day. 5 miles through our neighborhood, rain or shine. She'd been training for a half marathon. He stared at the maple tree across the street, its leaves burning red and gold. A neighbor found her on the sidewalk 3 blocks from our house. She'd had sudden cardiac arrest caused by a congenital heart defect that no one knew existed. It was hiding in her chest her whole life, waiting. One moment she was alive, laughing, planning our daughter's 3rd birthday party. Eclipse's hand moved to her mouth. I became a single father overnight, drowning in grief while trying to explain to a confused toddler why mommy wasn't coming home. Zephra, that's my daughter. She's 6 now. But back then she was so little. She kept setting a plate for Michelle at dinner. His voice roughened. For a long time I felt exactly what you described. Invisible. They sat in shared understanding, 2 people who'd been broken by life in different ways but understood the same fundamental truth. Loneliness was its own kind of death. How did you... Eclipse started, then stopped. Honestly, Zephra saved me. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart completely because she needed me. And my work helped too, helping kids recover from injuries, seeing them fight to get better. Before Eclipse could respond, the cafe door burst open with the force of a small hurricane. A little girl with wild brown curls and eyes the color of warm honey came barreling out, followed by a laughing woman who could only be Stephen's sister. The child launched herself at Stephen, who caught her with practiced ease. "Hey, Jellybean." "So good." Stephen's sister noticed Eclipse then, and her expression shifted to polite curiosity. The little girl turned to Eclipse with unfiltered interest. "Hi, I'm Zephra, and I'm 6 3/4, which is almost 7. Are you friends with my daddy?" For the first time since approaching Stephen, Eclipse laughed, really laughed. The sound was rusty, like something that hadn't been used in a very long time, but genuine. "Hi, Zephra. That's a beautiful name." Zephra bounced excitedly. "Do you want to come to the park with us?" Stephen started to object. Eclipse had been through enough today. But Eclipse spoke first. "I would love that," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. That afternoon at the park became the first of many.